Thanks very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Today's session that I'll be leading is Machine Learning and Marketing. What does it all mean? And hopefully over the next half an hour or so, we'll talk about real-life practical applications of machine learning and AI in marketing, and maybe give you some ideas of how you can use that within your own organization. So first, just a little obligatory marketing pitch from me to you about Dunn Solutions. So we're a digital consultancy, and we focus a lot on bringing velocity to our clients. Velocity, if you remember your high school physics, it's actually more than just speed. It's speed and direction. It's both of those things. And we deliver speed by automating a lot of the business processes that people do in business, and that's e-commerce, portals, customer interactions. And then we deliver direction using analytics, helping you understand what the best way to use the information you have in your organization to help drive some of your decisions. So if you have speed and direction, you end up with velocity. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the different parts of what we call the virtuous cycle of customer engagement. And obviously there's a lot of different components, but for today's talk, I just want to kind of give you an overview of like what we see as a way that things are all related to each other. So we believe we start with data and analytics, and you get information out of that data and analytics, and you use that to message to your customer base. And that's traditional marketing messaging, which we'll talk about during the presentation. There's also marketing automation, which you can segment and target people based on what they're interested in. And if you do a good job with your marketing automation, you end up driving people back to your store, whether that's e-commerce or in-person store. But basically what you're doing is you're trying to get people to come back to your store. And if you take the results of that interaction and their histories and how they've interacted with you, either online or offline, and you feed that back into your analytics, you can then understand how things went, and you can do a better job of then, again, doing analysis, changing your messaging, trying to drive more people back to your store. And if you do this properly, it's a cycle. It's not a one-shot type of thing. You end up hopefully generating more business because you are reacting and understanding to the way people interact with you and when they're buying your products. So a lot of that really should depend on predictive analytics and machine learning. And there's been a lot of chat about AI, and you know, even today, you probably can't go to a session without hearing somebody talking about AI. So, what really is this machine learning or AI? What is the difference between the way we perceive that topic versus traditional business intelligence and reporting? Hopefully in this session, I'll maybe give you our thoughts on that, and you'll come away with a better idea of when people are talking about AI, hopefully what they mean. So first up front, a very important thing, I always get into this with people, especially in marketing, when we talk about e-commerce and web, and they, we say, hey, are you doing analytics? And they go, yeah, we've got Google. I'm like, well, Google is, one component, but predictive analytics is not Google Analytics. Google Analytics is really more about, web views and how people are interacting with your web presences and ads. But predictive analytics really takes in information from all over the organization. So we're pulling in data from your accounting systems, from your HR, from your inventory management, and from your store's point of sale system, both online and offline. And we're trying to get all that data into one spot so we can do analysis and really understand what's going on in the entire business. So Google Analytics is a particular source of some data, but it's not what we're talking about when we talk about AI and machine learning. So you probably already have a lot of reports, and every system you have, gives you those reports. So the real question people ask all the time, what is the difference between predictive analytics and traditional analytics, the analytics, the reports and dashboards that I've been using for the last 20 years. So the way we look at it is traditional analytics more is about what happened in the past. It's like a rear view mirror when you're driving. It tells you, hey, you just passed by that, that stop sign, or, looking in the rear view mirror, there's a car behind you, that sort of thing. Predictive analytics and machine learning is more like a GPS. It tells you where you should be going by predicting what's going to happen if you take different decisions. So when you look at analytics, the two kinds. Predictive analytics are the kind that you normally would use to help you make the decisions, and traditional analytics would be those reports that tell you what happened, how did things go. So obviously predictive analytics is more interesting in a strategic perspective, because you want to decide where you want to go, versus just having to look in the rearview mirror to see where you fit. So some examples of different types of predictive analytics solutions that are out there and that we provide as a service, but you can get from a lot of other places as well. Marketing mix modeling, which is a big one. We'll talk about that in some case studies. That's understanding how much money you should allocate to every one of your marketing channels, and then try to maximize that spend. Market basket analysis, which is understanding what your customers buy together. Sometimes it's not so obvious. People always say hammer and nails, but a lot of times you find out that customers buy things that are you really wouldn't relate to each other. We had a customer that was trying to sell high-end watches, and it turned out that the best target audience for that customer were other customers who had bought garden supplies, and that is definitely not something that somebody would have come up with on their own without some analysis. And then the obvious ones, demand forecasting, understanding what your demand is going to be so that potentially you can have the right inventory in place. Churn propensity, which is also a really interesting thing. If you have thousands and thousands of customers who rebuy from you on a regular basis, wouldn't it be nice to know which one of those customers is starting to fade away, or maybe is being enticed by another competitor? Very difficult to do, just by looking at a report. You really can't see these trends. But predictive analytics can, create a score and tell you, hey, this customer or these set of customers, they look like they may be leaving you soon. So, you better go after them. And of course, promotional pricing and some other things. So we'll talk about that in some of the case studies. So these are some examples of the types of, services and solutions you can do with predictive analytics. So overall, we always look at the customer journey. And there's really two stages in the customer journey. There's this pre-engagement stage where you're trying to get people to understand who you are and to even consider you when they're looking to buy a product or service that's in the space that you are serving. And then there's the engagement stage where they now are interacting with you, potentially in person, on your website, with a sales rep, and there's some stages of things that customers go through that process as well. So you've all seen this type of customer journey before. What I wanted to show is just how some of the different types of predictive analytics can be used at each one of these stages. And we are definitely not going to go through all of these today, but really at each stage in the customer lifecycle, the customer journey, there's an opportunity to use predictive analytics. So, there's value that can be added from doing analysis no matter where the customer is in their customer journey. So we'll talk a little bit about the pre-engagement stage, which is where you're trying to go ahead and let customers know who you are, that you're out there in the market. It's a branding thing. So the question is, how could predictive analytics help in this stage? And there are a lot of different ways. A key one is understanding from historical data which specific marketing tactics are the most effective. So if you're going to spend money, understand where you should spend the money. Obviously, determining who your target market is and forecasting the market penetration is important. The reason that's important, obviously, is because you don't want to be spending money marketing to a segment that really isn't going to be very profitable, right? So you can blow a lot of money in marketing, being very effective marketing to a bunch of people who aren't going to be spending a lot of money with you, or when they do buy, buying a small amount. So understanding the segments and what their propensity to purchase is also very important, because it'll help you decide where you're going to put your time and your efforts, right? Also understanding the demand that's out there for new products or services, because that will also help you align where you should be marketing and how much money you should be spending on each one of the product lines you have, right? And then, of course, recommendations on pricing. Pricing is a big deal, and we'll have a case study talk a little bit about pricing, but unfortunately, a lot of people, when they look at pricing, they kind of put their fingers up, but they sort of guess, what the right price would be, or they look at what their competitors are doing, and that's not enough. I think if you apply predictive analytics and math to this, you can do a much better job of pricing properly and actually increasing your margins. And then, also just generally uncovering new trends and understanding consumer sentiments which help you as well adjust on the fly. So we'll talk a little bit about a few things, maybe start with marketing mix. With predictive analytics, you can actually get measurements on something that's very hard to do in just in a reporting process, like looking at reports and looking at bills. You can see which of your marketing efforts are actually generating the sales. So for a lot of companies, they don't just have one marketing tactic, right? You're not just Google ads, right? You typically, if you're a company that is bigger, you might have radio, TV, print ads, direct mail pieces. You might have billboards. You might have Google ads, or you might have ads on a LinkedIn network, on Facebook network. So you're spending your ad dollars in a lot of different ways, and so the question is, which one of those different ways is actually generating the most money? And then another question you have to answer is, how much am I spending on this channel, and am I spending maybe too much on this channel? Because there is a point at which you can spend more money, but you won't get any better results. So predictive analytics helps us solve that problem. So this is a case study. We changed some of the names to protect the innocent, but this is this particular company has about $7 million a year they spend on different advertising strategies. And so they have about $100 million in sales, and they have a bunch of different tactics they use: TV, radio, paid search, etc. So they never really formally measured the ROI on all these channels. So they really didn't know if they were spending too little, too much, or maybe not even the right mix. They basically just sort of made a guess as to how much money they were going to spend in each channel, and then maybe tweaked it every year, but without doing any real analysis. So we came in and we did some of this analysis, and we looked at their current spend versus their optimal spend. And in a couple of channels, now we just made this a little bit easier for today, but we did look at all the channels. And so the two lines you see on the screen right now reflect the spend versus the results. And the little diamond is their current spend. So the current spend is here for radio. Their current spend is here for paid search. But after the analysis, we found out that their optimal spend was back here. So this is what they really should be paying for paid search, and they shouldn't spend any more. And this is what they really should be spending for radio, and they should be spending a lot more than what they have today. So the reason is that at some point you see the curve flattens. So even though you're spending more and more and more money, you're not getting an ROI on that spend for that channel. And here they were spending too little. There was a lot of upside in the curve if they would spend more. So my point about this is not so much that you need to spend more money, but what we can do is, using analytics, we can understand how much money you should be spending to really maximize the return on the marketing dollars that you are putting out there into the world. So how do we end up doing in this case study? So we just reallocated their budget. So we didn't ask them to spend any more money. They spent exactly the same amount of money that they spent the previous year, but we just reallocated their budget. And just by doing that reallocation, we're able to increase about $2.4 million in revenue just from that reallocation. And then the profit also increased as well. So the model was very close. We were predicting a $1.47 ROI for this mix, and the actual ROI was $1.53. So it's really close. And we were expecting an increase in profit of 28%. It actually turned out to be 29%. So this is actually a really good example of how you were able to just make some tweaks and really get a better result set. So the other thing, once we move on to the other stage of the lifetime value of the customer, right now we're talking about engagement. Let's think about some of the things that we can do in this stage with predictive analytics and machine learning. So as you've been hearing, personalization is super important. And that's true for both B2B buyers and B2C buyers. So for people that were surveyed about personalization, how important was it? You can see that it's pretty dramatic. Basically, the customer's expectation is that they have a personalized experience. So the question is, how do you give customers a personalized experience? Well, what you need to do is internally embrace sort of this data culture, where you're starting to track all the different customer interactions that you have. And so if you're tracking the way the customer interacts with you, either on the web page, which categories they're looking at, which products they're looking at, which emails are opening, which call center interactions they're having, orders, and this is important, both offline and online. You can have a basis to begin with to start your personalization journey. And so we would suggest next that you use some data mining and predictive models to segment your customers into areas of interest. So if you see a customer that is looking at shoes, you make sure you don't send them emails about cameras. And you should identify those areas of interest and so start changing your marketing strategy so they start directly talking to them about the things that they're most interested in. And then you use the results of those analytics to personalize all your messaging out to your customers, whether it's email, text, etc. So you can start personalizing those. And technology lets you do this really at a one-on-one basis. I mean, you can go down to that level. So before you sort of used to do like this blast campaign or an email to everybody gets the same offer. And that's just not as effective as having personalized offers to each person based on the segments and the things that they're actually interested in. So once you have these segments, you can create different customer journeys based on that segment. So typically what we'll do with customers is work on, let's say, an email campaign that's targeted towards a specific segment. Might have a multi-touch drip campaign, right, where you have multiple emails going out. But those emails, the text on the emails, the images, the products, and sometimes even the pricing and the promotion will be different based on the segment. And so what you can do is once somebody has sort of opted themselves into a segment based on their historical data, then they start getting messaging around that segment. But it's not a one-shot thing. We are tracking them. And so as they change, as they become interested in other things, they may end up dropping out of that segment and dropping into another segment. And none of that is manual. That should all be an automated process. So, you have a bunch of different email strategies people use, and predictive analytics and machine learning sort of plays in there. So we have our wide burst strategy where you just literally send out the same email to everybody at the same time. And then as we discussed, we have these custom segments that are targeted. So when is it appropriate to use each one? So a wide burst is if it's an event that everybody is going to know about, having a Halloween event or a Christmas or holidays, and you just want everybody to know. And so basically you're sending this. The other place that is appropriate for a blast is you have newly acquired contacts. So they don't have any history of interaction with you. So for those contacts, you're not really sure what segment they're in. So you're going to send them a bit more generic email, which has a lot of options to start learning more about them. But once you have learned about them, now you start switching over to these custom segment email trends. And they're using that data and that analytics to understand their buying patterns. And you don't do as much emails that are based on time or date, but you do emails based on triggering events, like somebody coming to your website, somebody opting into something, somebody signing up for a coupon. That's a triggering event, and they start getting emails based on that triggering event. So I want to talk a little bit about some case studies around the different predictive analytics things that we mentioned earlier. Market basket analysis is a very common one. One of the things you need to understand is what is the most profitable way to get more out of each customer, increase the size of the market basket, both the literal and the virtual market basket online. And the way you do that is really understanding what the upsell and cross-sell should be for each of the products that your customer is purchasing. So that if you're online and somebody's purchasing a product, you start offering them products that are similar or that are what other people have purchased, or customers that you've gone through some analysis and you've decided that those are really the most profitable products to sell with the products that the customer's already buying. So there's an opportunity to sell something else when they're already there. And we see that a lot with e-commerce sites where somebody has spent a lot of money getting somebody to come to the e-commerce sites. The cost of acquisition is very high. But when they're on the site, the person only buys one thing and they check out. Well, you could look at it two ways. You could say, hey, I got somebody to buy something, and that is good. But another way to look at it is like, what if I could have gotten them to purchase two things? That way, I've really doubled, my revenue from my cost of acquisition. And so the only way to do that is to have the right selection, assortment, and upsell cross-sell opportunities. And so we did that for a customer, and we were able to increase the transactions that those customers were doing, quite a bit. and actually added about $2.5 million of revenue just based on recommendations that we had, at the checkout. The other thing that's important to understand is the propensity model. We talked a little bit about that, is like, who is most likely to actually buy something, right? And so this was a direct mail campaign. So this is more of a hard cost, because you are mailing out a physical mailer. And so there is, a cost of the mailer, the postage, printing, all that stuff. And if you do direct mail, either with catalog or physical mail still, because those are effective in certain markets, those can be pretty expensive. So it's very important to do some analysis up front and understand what is the most likely candidate to actually purchase your products, because it can be very expensive to send catalogs to companies, to either prospects or customers that never end up buying. Unfortunately, we've been the recipient. I've in my office, I get really expensive physical catalogs, and from companies that we've never bought anything from, and quite frankly, will never buy anything from. And I just wonder if, and nobody has ever done any analysis, I wonder if they just pick a zip code and send it to everybody. And so I think doing that analysis is really, really important, as opposed to just randomly sending out this information. And by doing the analysis, you really do two things. Number one, you make much more effective use of your marketing dollars, right? And you potentially could reduce your marketing spend if you get to a saturation level within a market. So it's better to know that rather than just kind of randomly sending out, those physical products. Another thing that we look at is, when you look at cost of acquisition, the flip side of acquisition is opt-out. And understanding why customers opt out is also very important. So we've done some analysis for some of our clients and try to understand what is the reason that certain of their clients are opting out. You might think, oh, the reason is because they're not interested. Actually, there's a lot of reasons why people opt out. One of the most annoying reasons people opt out is that they get too much email from you, or they get too little email from you. So there are some tests and predictive analytics we can do to figure out what is the appropriate level of email that should be sent to each customer. And then, of course, this personalization that we talked about earlier through AI and machine learning also helps you reduce opt-out, because the reason a lot of people opt out is they're getting emails that they have no interest in. So it's important to understand that, because what we're trying to do, again, is keep our customer base opted in. And I know that I get sometimes an email once a day from some vendors, and I actually like their products. I just don't want to get an email once a day. Other vendors, I'm the same person, but from another vendor, I like getting an email once every 2 days. So it really depends on the product they're selling, the person, a number of things. And you can do that analysis. You can even get down even close to an individual level with segmentation to understand what is the appropriate level of communication that each person wants. And I wouldn't just count on their answering those surveys, because when people opt out, sometimes they just opt out, or they put anything, so they're not going to always tell you why they opted out. So there's opportunities there. Offering the right discount. This is a big, big challenge for a lot of customers. So we see that when people have inventory, especially inventory that changes due to trend or due to time of year or other kinds of things, I call it, the fish, the fish kind of thing. The fish is, it costs $10 when it's brand new, and as the fish sits there, in the market, it starts getting more and more older, and its value sort of drops, and then you better sell that fish before it goes down to zero. So the question is, how much should you discount? Because what I see here is a lot of people are doing discounting just based on gut feel, and they're just, hey, we're gonna do a 20% discount, we're gonna do a 15% discount, we're gonna move some product. The problem is that if you just do it on gut feel, you're probably leaving money on the table. So there are really some negative outcomes. Number one, you might move a lot of product, but you might have left a lot of margin on the table because you over discounted, you discounted too much. The other option, which is also not good, is you don't sell anything because you haven't discounted enough to really move the needle. So what is the right answer and how much to discount? We can actually mathematically figure that out and get you an optimal value so that your margin is the highest. And that's a big, big win with data mining and machine learning, because we're taking into account you know, the time of the year, the product, the typical sales cycle, the seasonality. I mean, lots of things. It's not something you can just do manually. You really have to run it through. We can look at like 60, 70 different variables and try to figure out which ones really work together to make a difference. And we've done that for a number of places. So I would suggest if you are doing discounting and you're not using any kind of, you know, machine learning to help you out, then you should think about it, because it's a very low cost, relatively speaking, to the actual return on investment, which is very, very high, you know, if you do that. So at the end of the day, you know, a little pitch at the end for us is you need somebody to help you through this journey on the machine learning and AI. I would ask, hey, think about us, and we'd love to talk to you a little bit more, and maybe we can help you no matter where you are in your journey with using machine learning. And I hope that you know, today's talk was interesting, and maybe you learned a little bit something about machine learning and advanced analytics. So that's the end of the official talk. I'm open to any chat or if we have any time left.
Yes, we do have about 5 minutes left for questions. So we do have a few here. Our first question is, how do we navigate the world of personal privacy?
Well, you know, that's a very good question. And the way to, I think, do it in the nicest way that's best for the consumer as well as yourself is to make sure that you have the consumer opt in to the tracking that you want to do. And if they don't opt in, then you really shouldn't be tracking them at a personal level. You can track them generically, like anonymously, but not on a personal level. The reason I think that it's important is a lot of consumers actually want to be tracked for a very good reason. If you're doing a good job with messaging to them and giving them offers, and you know, they want help in buying, and if you're doing a good job in helping them do their job, you know, either on a personal level in their life or in their business, they're happy to get offers and emails and things from you that will help them do their jobs, but they need to agree to it. So I think being able to you know, track their preferences and their opt-ins is very important, especially in Europe. Of course, we have GDPR. In the US, eventually we'll have the same sort of thing. We work with a couple different technology vendors. We don't do that, but we do work with some technology vendors that have ready to use very simple systems off the shelf that'll let you you know, track the permissioning from your different customers.
And our next question, why are so few companies leveraging their current data collection to better communicate with their audience?
Well, I think that it's a little bit daunting. The data is very large. People try to do it, you know, on spreadsheets, or they try to do it, you know, in with their local, you know, IT folks, and it's just overwhelming at sometimes. The data also is coming in different formats from different places. So the first problem that has to be solved is getting that data in one place where it can be used. And I think that first hurdle is a big hurdle for folks. Once you get over that hurdle, it becomes significantly easier, because once you have the data in one place, then you can start doing a lot of interesting analytics without wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy on playing around with spreadsheets and data files.
We have a question here. Are you able to use predictive analytics to offer free shipping and adjust prices accordingly per segment? If so, what trends are happening currently?
So free shipping is another promotion, right? So I think that when I think about free shipping, it's the same thing as a 10% off coupon or a 5% off coupon. It's just another promotion. So the answer is yes, of course. You can use predictive analytics to understand which one of your segments need that promotion. I would say, taking a step back generically, you can use predictive analytics to target promotions to different segments based on their specific needs. And what we're seeing is that certain promotions become popular over time. We've seen a lot of BOGO, you know, buy one, get one free, buy one, get one 50% off. There's all these different, free shipping is just another promotion. And so with a little experimentation and a little data analytics, we can actually figure out if it's worth it or not, because there's a cost to free shipping. It's not really free. So we have to just see the cost versus the uptick in revenue and margin.
What platforms do you recommend for predictive analytics?
So there are many platforms that are available in the market. Some platforms that we use, we do a lot of work with both Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure in using their platforms as sort of like a cloud-based way of doing very fast and low-cost storing and analysis of data. And then programming-wise, our programmers use different languages. We use languages like Python and R, but there's also, of course, some products that have been out in the market for a very long time, like SAS, that are also very good products. So I can only tell you the things that we use, and those are the technologies that we use today.
And then our last question, what is the most important KPI, the one that will tell you the most information for a digital marketer?
Oh, just one. I think I think propensity to buy. That might be really important, right? Because as a digital marketer, you need to understand where you're going to spend your time and your efforts. So, what is your audience? And if you know your audience, I think that drives lots of things. It drives your content, your budget, all the. So if that was the only one, I would say that would be the number one. But of course, it's a trick question because I think there's probably a few KPIs that are really important.
Well, thank you, Bill. That does conclude all of our questions. So thank you for the wonderful presentation.